Okay. Let us begin. Everyone's going to mute themselves just till we're done, and then everyone can unmute and ask all sorts of questions, as we always allow here. Okay, let us begin. We're up to mitzvah number 138. We're following the mitzvahs in the order in which they appear in the Torah, and we're right now towards the beginning of Leviticus. And we're talking all about mitzvos that are pertaining to the temple and to the sacrifices that are done in the temple. And the mitzvos that we're going to cover today, it's 138 through 141. 3 of them are about processing specific sacrifices. So 138 is processing a sin sacrifice. 140 is processing an asham, a guilt offering. And 141 is processing a shlamim, a peace offering. So this is not the mitzvah to bring these sacrifices. Those mitzvahs we already saw. It's once those sacrifices are brought, it's a mitzvah upon the Kohen or the whoever's the priest that's working in the temple to process it in a way that is following the protocol set forth in the Torah. And we're also going to briefly mention mitzvah number 139, which is the restriction against eating from sin sacrifices whose blood is sprinkled inside. Typically, the sin sacrifice, the blood is sprinkled outside on the outer altar, and those sin sacrifices, at least a portion of them, are consumed by the Kohanim. But the ones that are sprinkled inside, there is a prohibition against the consumption of any part of the sin sacrifices when the blood is sprinkled inside. So we're going to cover these mitzvos, and then at the end, I'm going to share an important idea about sacrifices in general, especially because these mitzvos, they're so foreign to us. They're so distant from us. We haven't brought a sacrifice in a sanctioned fashion in what, 1900 years? That's a long time. And when you read the Torah, it takes up such a big part of the instruction of Hashem to us. So much is dedicated to the temple, to the tabernacle, to the sacrifices, to the manifold different sacrifices. And we want to study the Almighty's Torah. We want to understand what He wants of us. You open up the Mishnah, and there are enormous portions of the Mishnah, of the oral law, that deal with things that we've never seen or done. You open up the Talmud, and you can spend years, decades, just studying on a basic rudimentary level the Talmudic portions that are dedicated towards the temple processes and sacrifices. So is there an idea that could be relevant to us who are so distant from these concepts? That's what we will share, please God, at the very end. Okay, so there's an interesting element of this subject, of these particular mitzvos, and that is that the mitzvah is not about the obligation, whoever is obligated to offer the sacrifice. Rather, the obligation is on the Kohanim to process the sacrifice in accordance with the ordinances and the protocols of that particular sacrifice. And the Sefer HaChinuch, which is the book that we are using to navigate through the mitzvos, he spends some time highlighting the fact that this is following the opinion of Rambam. We know that there are 613 mitzvos. That is clear. Everyone agrees upon that. The Talmud says that. The exact delineation of these 613 is hotly contested. And the Sefer HaChinuch, he's going to follow the Rambam. The Rambam has his delineation, the 365 negative mitzvos, restrictions, prohibitions, transgressions, the 248 positive performative mitzvos. The Sefer HaChinuch is going to follow the Rambam in all of these matters, but he's going to cite the opinion of the Ramban. So Rambam and Ramban, Maimonides and Nachmanides, they have a different calculation. According to Rambam, there are 5 separate mitzvos, 5 distinct mitzvos to offer the Ola, the Chatas. So the Ola is the elevation offering. The Chatas is the sin offering. The Asham is the guilt offering. The Shlamim is the peace offering. And of course, the Mincha, which is the meal offering. 5 of the 613 are the mitzvahs of the Kohanim to offer it, whereas Ramban, he says there's only one mitzvah, a general mitzvah, and that is Kohanim must process the sacrifices in the way that is fitting, that is appropriate for that particular respective sacrifice. Now he's going to side with Rambam, and he uses very, very beautiful language to explain why. He says, we're following the Rambam. And if you have any questions about it, and you find the other opinion to be more persuasive, don't attribute the difficulties to Rambam. He's a legend. Even Rambam's contemporaries understood that he's such a legend. If you have any problems, focus your attention on us. And then he says, Rambam, he is the cause of our initiative, the grand initiative of the Sefer Chinuch, to write an essay, a chapter on every one of the 613 mitzvahs in the order in which they appear in the Torah, and to give a little flavor, a little snapshot about these mitzvahs, and to offer some rationale, some underlying reason that resonates with us for every mitzvah, and to give a sampling of the laws of the mitzvah. The reason why we did this initiative, says the Sefer Chinuch, is because of the Rambam. And it's only in his merit that we're doing it. And therefore, we're going to follow him, even though there is perhaps a very good argument to follow the Ramban in this particular subject, namely the number of mitzvos that are of the 613 that are related to the Kohanim's responsibility to follow the protocol of every distinct sacrifice. Now, he's going to spend some time telling us about some of the details about all these sacrifices. And again, it's very hard for us to really understand it in a way that resonates. And he's going to address that. And he says, like, these mitzvahs are above us. And he says, unlike other mitzvahs where I'm going to offer a rationale, why the mitzvah has a certain, the laws or what's the reason behind it, a way to understand it on our level. Here he says, I'm not going to do any of that. When it comes to the details of sacrifices, when they're slaughtered and how they're slaughtered and where they're slaughtered and which place and the various intricacies of how they're offered and how the blood is sprinkled and the time in which they may be eaten and the place in which they may be eaten or when they must be burned. All of those details, and there are, again, myriads of details for every particular sacrifice, and there's tons of different sacrifices. All that is beyond us. It's above us. Not to say, of course, that there's no reason. He doesn't say that these are arbitrary. Of course, nothing is arbitrary in the Torah. Everything is really with the utmost precision and purpose, but it's, for us, unfathomable. And he says, maybe if you have a real standout scholar, someone who's deeply steeped and schooled in matters of Kabbalah, of the esoterica, maybe someone like that can understand the secrets behind the intricacies of the processing of the sacrifices. But we will subsist, says the Sefer Chinuch, with the general notion of sacrifices. That he said it once, but he's constantly revisiting it. What's the general idea? The general idea is that humans, we're impressionable up to a point. And when someone wants to repent, you could repent and confess and say you're going to change. But actions, when someone does something, when someone sees something, when someone visualizes something, that actually creates a more indelible imprint upon them. So when someone takes an animal and brings it to the temple and sacrifices it to God, that reinforces the importance, the imperative to not follow your animalistic tendencies. It does it in a way that greatly exceeds the impact of just staying in your house and repenting and offering verbal confession. And that's the idea, the general idea behind all sacrifices. And in all these mitzvahs, you can say, I'm not going to offer a reason, why is the shlamim, the peace offering different than the asham, the guilt offering, which is different than the sin offering, and all the different types. I'm not going to offer reasons for each one of them specifically. We're just going to talk about it in a more general sense. And says the Sefer Chinuch, I have discharged my responsibility in explaining the underlying ideas behind these mitzvahs by saying the more general idea, not the more specific idea. I will tell you that I ordered some books this week that are dedicated towards explaining the deep and intricate secrets behind the actual details of the sacrifices. And I'm gonna try to spend some time going through them just because I find it fascinating that there's so many details and so much nuance in it, and there's a secret behind everything, and there's layers and layers of understanding behind everything, as there is with everything in Torah. But he's not going to do that for us. He's giving us the overview, the basic upshot, if you will, of these mitzvos, and he's not going to dwell on that level with respect to sacrifices. Now, in mitzvah number 138, which is the mitzvah of processing sin sacrifices, he offers us a sampling of the laws. And he tells us that there are 5 different animals from which you can bring a sin sacrifice. So there's the sheep, and there's the sheep and goats, and livestock, and 2 types of birds, turtle doves and young pigeons. And some sacrifices are individual sacrifices, and some are brought by the public, and some are burned entirely, and some are eaten, with exception of their innards, which are burned, and they are sprinkled only on the outer mizbech, the outer altar. The inner altar is used only for incense during the year, but on Yom Kippur, there is also some blood services done on the inner altar. And then he proceeds to delineate the anatomical parts that are going to be burned. And I found it to be very helpful. I have the Art Scroll Sefer Chinuch, and it's got some pictures. As someone who is not very schooled in animal husbandry, it's very helpful for me to look at these pictures and look at these diagrams and to look at the 4 stomachs, the Abu Mazam. I am probably butchering the pronunciation of that. The reticulum, okay. The duodenum, and the rumen. And there's this very nice picture, this cutaway view of the stomach and all the different parts, and what parts are going to be burned on the altar, etc. And he talks about the fat that's on the innards and the fat that's on the Abu Mazam, and that's, of course, one of the 4 stomachs. And he talks about the kidneys with the fat and the fat of the flanks, and the again, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of all of these, the caudate, which is a lobe of the liver. And it goes through which parts are going to be offered on the altar, which ones are burned, and the goats, and then the tail, and the vertebrae of the spine, and the kidneys, etc., goes through the details, or some of the details of the processing of a sin sacrifice. Now, between the various sacrifices that he's going to talk about, the mitzvah of processing them, we have mitzvah number 139, which is the prohibition against consuming from the inner sin offering. The Kohanim cannot eat from any of the meat of sacrifices that are done inside, namely in the inner altar. They're not eaten, instead they are burned. And again, he does not offer a reason for this. That's mitzvah number 139. Mitzvah number 140, that is the processing of the guilt offering. So that's the asham. And again, he does not offer any insight into the deeper ideas behind this mitzvah. And again, for us, the whole subject is quite foreign. But the Sefer Chinuch does stress that there's many different types of guilt offerings, and they're all identical in their processes, with the exception of the Asham Mitzora. He just says that. But in the art scroll, on the footnotes, they're very helpful. They give you a lot of, it almost serves as like a commentary. This is what it says, just to get I think it's important for us to at least mention some of the subjects that are present over here. So the footnote reads like this: all Asham offerings were slaughtered in the northern part of the courtyard. The blood from the slaughter was received in a vessel and thrown against two diagonally opposite corners of the altar, so that it touched all four of its sides. So if you have a box and you want to do two applications, you do it on diagonally opposite corners, and it touches all four walls. Now, the blood that remained in the vessel was poured upon the southern base of the altar, and afterwards the emurim, which is the innards, were separated from the animals. They're salted and placed upon the altar for burning. And the rest of the offering was eaten by the male Kohanim in the courtyard during the day of slaughter and the following night. And then it tells us the difference between the Asham, the typical Asham, and the Asham Mitzora, the Asham brought by a Mitzora. Again, I'm quoting from the footnote here. In contrast to other Ashamos, whose blood was received by just one Kohen with a utensil, the blood of the Mitzora's Asham was received by two Kohanim, one using a utensil and the other using his hand. Okay. The blood received in the utensil was thrown on the walls of the altar, as with all Ashamos, while the blood in the Kohen's hand was applied with a finger to the Mitzora's right ear, right thumb, and right big toe. Again, you read this and we don't know. There's so many secrets here, and it's so mysterious to us. And finally, there's mitzvah number 141, which is the processing of a shlamim. A shlamim is a sacrifice that everyone gets a part of. They speculate that the reason why it's called shlamim, from the word shalom, which means peace, is that everyone gets a part. The altar gets a part, and the Kohen gets a part, and the person who brings it gets some of the animal to eat with their family. That is the shlamim. And for a third time, he does not offer a deeper reason behind this mitzvah, but once again goes through some of the laws. A shlamim can be brought from sheep, from goats, and from livestock, from males and from females, from large animals, so aged animals, and young animals, but no birds. And what's the definition of a young animal? That's from 8 days old until 1 year. So certain shlamim, peace offerings, are brought from young animals, which is the time between 8 days. First 8 days, it cannot be brought as a sacrifice, as the verse tells us. But once 8 days have passed up to a year, if there is a leap year, like this year, so it's 5784 when we're speaking in the Jewish calendar, this year, it's a double Adar. We have two Adars, Adar 1, Adar 2. There are actually 12 months in this current calendar year. So what happens if there's an animal and there happens to be a leap year in its first year of life? Is it 12 months or is it a year? And the answer is that when there's a leap year, it extends the eligibility of a young animal up to the day, so to speak, of its birth, even though that may be 13 months later. An old animal, it's from year 1 until year 3 with livestock, and with sheep from year 1 until year 2, until it's finished 2 years, and afterwards it is considered an old animal, and it cannot be brought as a sacrifice. And then he's going to run through some of the different types of shlamim sacrifices. There are 4 types of shlamim sacrifices: 1 brought by the public, 3 brought by individuals, and he goes through some of the differences and some of the instances where someone would bring an individual sacrifice. There's the certain types of shlamim sacrifices are brought without any bread, without any accompanying bread, namely meal offerings. That's the Shalmi Chagiga, brought on the festivals, Shalmi Simcha. And then you have the ones brought as a form of a vow. And then you have the third type, which is brought by the Nazir on the day that he finishes his Nazir tenure. And he, again, surveys some of the laws. What portions are given to the Kohanim. There's the breast and the right thigh, which goes to the Kohen. But with the ram of the Nazir, it's also the right foreleg. And how much bread and what type of bread, which ones are chametz, which ones are not chametz, what's the division of the different types of bread, how they're leavened, all the calculations of the different types of bread. Again, he's going to briefly survey some of the many, many laws that relate to mitzvah number 141. That's the processing of a shlamim sacrifice. Okay. What about us? We're reading this, we're learning this, and it seems so foreign. Even the notion of a temple, the notion of a place in our world where the Almighty and the Almighty's presence is felt. That's a novel idea for us. It's a foreign idea. We can't imagine a place in our world that would be hospitable for God. But that's what the tabernacle was. That's what the temple was. And we believe that when Messiah comes, well, we'll have the third temple. And there will be a corner, there'll be a place in the world that can serve as a domicile for God, so to speak, as a residence where he can dwell. That notion is strange for us. It's hard for us to be at ease with it. And certainly the notion of animal sacrifices and all the different types of sacrifices and so much literature about it. What's a perspective to make our study of this subject more salient, more germane? What's a way to think about it? So I want to suggest a way to think about this. The great Chafetz Chaim, he was the greatest Jew of the beginning of the 20th century. He wrote many foundational books on all sorts of subjects. He's called Chafetz Chaim because his first book was about the laws of Lashon Hara. And it's a citation from Psalms chapter 34, where King David says, who is the man who is Chafetz Chaim, who's desirous of life? You want life? What do? Guard your tongue from speaking evil, and your lips from deceit. First thing he advises, you want life? Don't speak evil. And the Chafetz Chaim, as he became known by the name of his book, his name was Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan. Kagan is a form of Kohen. He was a Kohen, as we shall see. He's going to spend some time talking about the Kohen. But he wrote many, 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 many books. He's known as the Chafetz Chaim. One of his books is a short work. It's called Tzipisa Liyeshua, which means, did you anticipate redemption, salvation? And it's a citation from the Talmud. The Talmud says in the book of Shabbos on page 31a that when a person is inspected by the heavenly tribunal, they will ask him 6 questions. And one of the questions is, Tzipisa liyeshua. Did you anticipate, did you yearn, did you await for salvation? Did you await for Messiah? And the whole book is about this idea of the importance and the perspective of awaiting redemption, awaiting Messiah. And chapter or paragraph, I don't know if it's chapter, it's really section number 3, it's all about what can we do. And when you read the book, he takes kind of like it's like a surprising curveball that he throws at you. He starts off by saying, we always talk about the importance of awaiting Messiah, and it's part of our prayers. And he mentions specifically the Aleinu prayer that we say 3 times a day, 4 times on Shabbos and festivals, and more times even on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We talk about how we yearn, we hope, we await to see very, very swiftly the return of God's kingdom. We say, at least we profess, that we're interested in redemption. Are we really interested? Are we genuine in our claim of anticipating Messiah? Are our actions compatible with that claim? It's important for us to await Messiah. There's an obligation to yearn for Messiah. Yearning for Messiah hastens his arrival, but you have to be serious about it. And what does it mean to be serious? It means to be ready. And a major part of the Messiah is the building of the temple and the reinstitution of sacrificial law. And if someone is really anticipating, it's serious, it's genuine, it's sincere, you have to actually prepare. And you have to know what that's like. You have to familiarize yourself with these laws. You have to gain at least a basic understanding of what life will be with the temple. And he gives an example. Suppose there's a king who's coming to visit a certain town. Well, they made sure that every road in the town is festooned with banners and flags, even if it's not part of the itinerary. Because the king may be coming. You got to be ready. Well, if the king of all kings is coming, we have to be ready. In the times of Messiah, all these laws that seem so foreign to us are not foreign anymore, are not theoretical, abstract, historical, scholarly analyses. They are very practical. And if there is a so-called Torah scholar who doesn't know these laws, it's going to be very embarrassing. It's going to be a disgrace. And specifically, says the Chafetz Chaim, how could someone say in the prayer, Al Kain, therefore, nekaveh, we await for your return. We await for Messiah. We want it. And not actually be preparing? You're invoking the name of God, says the Chafetz Chaim, 3 times a day. Every week, more than 48 times. Thousands of times a year. And you're saying something which your actions are not compatible with. So you're uttering the name of God in vain. How can you say before God, using God's name, that you are anticipating, you are awaiting, you are yearning that the holiness of God, the honor of God will be revealed in the world if you're not actually doing it? And then he says, okay, maybe we could judge favorably. The masses, let's judge the masses favorably. Because they'll say, listen, I'm not a Kohen. I'm an ordinary guy. I don't do any work in the temple. I'm a layperson. The Kohanim, they're the ones who are responsible. Okay, so maybe we could not attribute blame to the masses. But at a minimum, the Kohanim, they certainly should become well-versed in these laws. After all, God selected them. And every day, every single day, there is the potential that Messiah is coming. And he cites the Talmud. The Talmud says, if a person says, I am rendering myself a Nazir on the day that the temple is rebuilt, the day that Messiah comes, every single day you can't drink wine because maybe Messiah will come today. So halachically, we have an understanding that Messiah can come any day. If you're a Kohen, that means that any day you could be called up to reserve duty to work in the temple. And he cites an historical example. After the second redemption, when the Jews came back from Babylonia to build the second temple, the verse tells us that the Kohanim, the priests, they were the source that everyone went to for their questions about how to live now in a regime of the temple. And certainly when Messiah comes and the third temple is rebuilt, this will be true as well. And how much disgrace and shame will the Kohanim have? But they won't know what to say. They'll have no idea. They never learned it. And then he says, certainly the Kohanim, they must gain a foothold in understanding this. But it's not just the Kohanim. Every Torah scholar must dedicate some time to learn the laws that are pertinent to the temple and to sacrifices. And there's the calculation. Talmud says that out of every 1,000 that enter the academy, maybe 100 can graduate to study the Talmud. And of that, there's very, very few scholars that really emerge. So out of every 100 people, 99% of them are going to be lay people. They're lay people. They're not scholars. But that one person, they should certainly have a grounding, a foothold in these laws. That's what he tells us. In the times of the temple, the Kohanim, the priests, they would learn. And they would go to the scholars. The scholars may not have been priests themselves, but they were experts. And they would learn how to do shechita, slaughtering, how to do Kabbalah, how to do all the processes that the Kohen must do in the temple. And certainly in times of Messiah, well, anytime a person traverses an ocean, they have to bring a sacrifice. Anytime which is the Thanksgiving sacrifice, anytime a sick person is healed, which happens all the time, they have to bring a sacrifice. Anytime someone by mistake violates the Shabbos, they have to bring a sacrifice. So life's going to change. Someone by mistake violates the Shabbos. They run to the Kohen. I must bring your sacrifice. Help me. And the Kohen's like, well, what do I know about this? I'll run to the scholar. Says the Chafetz Chaim, how much bizayon, shame, and disgrace and ignominy will arrive at the foot of these purported Torah scholars that won't know how to respond. And what's going to be? You'll say, okay, when Messiah comes, then we'll begin our intensive study. It'll take us a few weeks to, brush up on our skills. A few weeks, a few months. Says the Chafetz Chaim. Again, Chafetz Chaim passed away 90 years ago. 1933. He says, look at the world. In our time, almost all the indicators that our sages have told us that are harbingers of Messiah, that are portents of Messiah, almost all of them are present. If you read the literature and you compare it to what you see around you, it seems like the world is readying itself for Messiah. Again, this is written 90 years ago. And the Chafetz Chaim is saying Messiah seems to be imminent because, after all the variables and all the factors that are described in the Talmud, they are all present. Now today, that statement is way more true than it was then. But the Chafetz Chaim was saying in his time, he already sensed that Messiah is imminent, all the more so today. And therefore, every person should try to prepare. And it's imperative to not say, we'll have a few weeks off to brush up on the laws. No, we can't delay it a second. And then he cites the Talmud. The Talmud says that the great scholar asked Elijah, well, where's Messiah? He says, well, he's in the outskirts of Rome, and you'll find him. He's the one who is wrapping and unwrapping his bandages one at a time. And the reason why he's doing it one at a time, it's because in case he gets summoned to go save the Jewish people, he won't delay. And we, of course, when we did in our Torah 101 series, we spoke about Messiah. We did 16 episodes. We mentioned this Talmud a bunch of times. If Messiah doesn't want to delay even a second, won't even wait a few minutes to finish up his bandages, it's imperative to not delay this at all. And certainly us, we have to do our part, and that's to have a complete grasp of all the laws, or at least some of our sages should have a complete grasp of all the laws, so there should not be any delays. And then he cites an example from the Talmud. The Talmud talks about the decision to eliminate a mitzvah. They eliminated a mitzvah because that mitzvah would require us to inflict. That mitzvah would require, because that mitzvah would require us to inflict a blemish on animals. And what's going to be, says the Talmud, when Messiah comes and we need animals for sacrifices. And therefore, it's important for us to eliminate this mitzvah. So we see that the sages, they eliminated a mitzvah from the Torah because it could result in a delay in the implementation of the messianic features. And certainly us. We have to make sure that we can't subsist and say, well, Messiah will come and then we'll do our sacrifices 101. And therefore, every day when we say Aleinu, the Aleinu prayer that he started off with, what should we be thinking about? We're hoping for the kingdom of God to be restored. What you should be thinking about, says the Chofetz Chaim, is how do I get the Kohanim to become experts, to become kanyashenti in all these matters? And if you have that thought and you implement that, that's an indication that you're actually anticipating Messiah. And then he adds, this is not only for the Kohanim, and it's not even only for the scholars. There are many services in the temple that can be done by a non-Kohen. So even the Israelites should get involved. And then he ends off with a few citations about how important and how great and how holy and how powerful the study of these laws are. He cites the Talmud, for example, in the book of Megillah on page 31. I believe it's 31a, towards the bottom. Abraham and God are having a conversation. This is in chapter 15 of Genesis. Abraham is worried what's going to be with his future descendants. The verse says, Mama Eda, how do I know that I will inherit the land? So the Talmud is explaining what the actual back and forth was. What will be? Abraham was concerned. He was worried. What will be if my descendants are sinners? Now, we know what happens to sinners. Look at the generation of the flood, or the generation of the Tower of Babel and the dispersal. So what's going to be with my descendants? So what did God respond? Take an animal. That's the covenant of the parts. That response, God, the Talmud explains, God was saying to Abraham, well, they have sacrifices, and sacrifices will cleanse them of their transgressions. But Abraham persisted. That's great when the temple is extant. What will be in times that the temple is not extant? How do we benefit from the expiation properties of the sacrifices to cleanse the record, to clean us from any spiritual blemishes? How do we do that when we don't have a temple? So God responded with sacrifices, not the implementation of sacrifices, but the study of sacrifices. If you study it, not just to read it on a superficial level, but you study it, that has the same power as the actual bringing of a sacrifice. And God, says the Midrash, says the Talmud, God will forgive us from all our sins. What saves us from devastation and destruction when we don't have a temple and cannot bring sacrifices? Well, the study of sacrificial law. Continues the Chofetz Chaim, he cites another Midrash. The Midrash says that people should not say, well, in the past we would bring sacrifices, and today we cannot bring sacrifices, and therefore we're doomed. But it says, no, if you study it, you deepen your studying in these laws, it's like you brought it, and that will bestow upon you the same benefits as actually bringing the sacrifice. And he cites yet a third midrash that tells us that God told the Jewish people, I know that the temple will be destroyed and the sacrifices will cease, but don't forget the laws. Be careful to read them and to review them and to study them. And if you do, I will treat it as if you brought a sacrifice as well. And the Chafetz Chaim says, I know what you're going to respond. Yeah, I know you'll say, well, we're so busy and there's so many other things we need to do. We need to actually learn the laws that are pertinent to us. That's a good rebuttal. Well, yes, it's important to learn the laws that are pertinent in the times of Messiah. But what about us today? We have to make sure that we don't neglect the laws that are pertinent to us. So the Chafetz Chaim, he responds, kind of has like a masterful response. He says, well, people study the books of Sanhedrin and Makos and Yevamos, and most of the things that they study in those particular books are not pertinent today. So the laws of kachim, the laws of sacrifices, they should be no different. And then he says, in the times of the Talmud, they lived in Babylon in the 3rd, 4th, 5th centuries. They didn't have a temple. Yet they dedicated tremendous efforts to study the laws of sacrifices. And he proves that point. And therefore, for this reason, it's imperative for us to study these laws. And he cites the Rambam. And then he cites another incredible citation from the Zohar, where the Zohar says, if a person in the shul, in the synagogue, in the academy, in the Beis Medrash, if they study the laws of sacrifices and how they are brought, and they have the proper intention, meaning they study it deeply, there is a promise that the angels in heaven that are tasked with being incriminating the prosecuting angels will have no power over them. And the Talmud and the Zohar continues, this is a secret that was revealed by Elijah. If you want to thwart your heavenly detractors, the angels that are created by every sin creates an angel. And those angels, they come and they indict a person. But if a person studies the laws of kachim, the laws of sacrifices, they have no power over them. Says the Chafetz Chaim, this should be enough to encourage everyone to try to study these laws. We all have sins, of course, and thus we all have heavenly detractors. And what will we not give up to silence those heavenly detractors? And today, there's nothing that can stop us. In times of the temple, if you were David, king of Israel, Solomon, king of Israel, you're the king. You can't walk into the Holy of Holies. You can't walk into the holy parts of the temple. You cannot bring sacrifices. Some stuff you could do, but most things you cannot do. But today, there's nothing that's stopping anyone. Even the ordinary Israelite can study these laws. And when they do that, the Almighty considers it as if they brought that sacrifice. And then he says, okay, there's a lot more. And I wrote another book about this, but that's how he ends this work, Tzipisa LiYeshua. Did you anticipate? Did you await? Did you yearn for redemption, for salvation, for Messiah? I think this is a very valuable perspective for us. We read about this, and it's hard for us to see the value, the pertinence, the salience of these laws. It seems so theoretical. I think a way for us to think about this going forward is in this context. Yes, today we don't have a temple. We have not had a temple literally thousands of years, right? Not quite, because it's like 1950, but it's literally centuries and almost 2,000 years. And we may think, well, okay, these are not pertinent. They're not pertinent until they very, 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 very much are. And the study of these laws, that's the implementation of a person's sincere desire to witness the kingdom of God being restored to the world, to witness the Messiah, to witness the temple being rebuilt. So yes, when you think about these laws and the shlamim and the sin offering and the asham and the guilt offering and the mincha and the olah, it kind of it's kind of like swirls in our brain in a way that doesn't really click, because again, it is very foreign to us. Chafetz Chaim is telling us that this is the way to say that we're genuine in our sincere desire to witness this transformation and this revelation of God in the world. So I think that's a good perspective, for all the things that we've covered hitherto with respect to the laws, the mitzvos that are related to the temple and the temple processes and protocols, and going forward as well. We hope to witness that day. It can happen this week. Is there anything that prevents it from happening this week? Nothing. And we're supposed to believe it's one of the 6 questions that we get asked. Did you await Messiah? And we say it every day. We want to make sure that when we say it every day, we are sincere and genuine. So this is, I think, a perspective that helped me to understand how these laws fit into our lives. We have mitzvah number 138 through 141, the mitzvah of processing, not bringing, but processing, the Kohen processing a sin sacrifice, an asham sacrifice, and a shlom sacrifice. We also had mitzvah number 139, which was the restriction against eating from the sin sacrifices whose blood was sprinkled inside. We still have lots of mitzvos left in Leviticus. We're up to 141 now out of 613. May we all merit to witness the temple being rebuilt, sacrifice being restored, and who knows, maybe we will have the great privilege of being alive and witnessing that, seeing the kingdom of God being restored in the world. May we all be fortunate to witness that day. May it happen speedily in our times. Of course, my email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I look forward to your questions, your comments, and your feedback. Okay. Sharon asked a question in the chat here. Where can you find an English translation? So I have a book here called the Book of Mitzvos. And this is 1 volume out of, I believe it's 10. And this is the book going through 630 mitzvos. You were referring to this. You're referring to the Tzvi Yeshua. Is that translated to English? I have to say that I'm completely proficient in Hebrew. Okay. So I just looked it up now. This is available in English on Sefaria. So here we go. That's the book.
I do have a question concerning the ashes, the sacrificial, after the burnt offering, the ashes. In this door, it mentions in the offerings portion that when the Kohen removes the ashes and puts it beside the altar, and then he changes his clothes, and then he takes those ashes and moves them to a pure place.
Yes.
We're talking about the temple that it was in Israel, right? So where was that pure place?
Outside the city. Outside the city.
But where? I mean, like, what do they mean a pure place?
There was a location outside the city where they put all the burnt ashes. Yeah, we did speak about the mitzvah. I spoke about it a few times. We spoke about it in the context of studying the mitzvos, but also on my Parsha podcast, I spoke about that a few times, I think, about the.
Well, I'm new, so.
Yeah. Okay. So
I've always had that question
on the catalog, but yeah, so it was outside the city. There was a special designated place. I don't know if we know exactly where it was, but it was outside the city where the ashes were deposited. Yeah. And I shared in the chat, if you want to find the book that I mentioned. So I only read, I guess, section number 3, but what I shared you is just the beginning of it. I guess they call it chapter 1 here. It's a lovely, lovely read. It's short, it's not long, and I would recommend it. It will fit in nicely with some of the other things that we spoke about when we did our Messiah series. It'll fit in nicely with that.
Rabbi, I quickly went to it, and it said that the children are cut off from learning Torah. That's the first line. It starts off with the children are cut off from Torah learning.
Okay.
I mean, I just glanced at it. That seemed weird.
Well, you tell me, how many Jewish children in America know what Shema Yisrael is? You tell me.
I don't know. I'd like to think at least half.
You think at least half? You're
If
very
they go,
optimistic.
if they go to synagogue,
How many American Jews go to synagogue?
I would hope they know the Shema.
How many American Jews go to synagogue? You tell me.
I think there's not many American Jews that know the Shema.
Yeah,
I come
it's a
from,
very
yeah,
sad state of
I think
affairs.
it's small.
I think
I
it's
think
very
it's very
small.
small.
You know, I think the majority of American Jews do not go to shul. The majority. That's a terrible state of affairs. So yeah,
that's
they are cut off.
probably true.
As sad as it sounds, they are cut off, and we have to do whatever we can to reverse that.
Okay, so I guess it all begins at home. If you're, as we always said before, if your parents or a parent or a grandparent or somebody shares that with you, you can more familiar. You won't be cut off.
For sure, for sure. Our number one responsibility is for our children, but all of the rest of our Jewish brethren are brothers and sisters. And if we don't do something, at least to try, then we're partially culpable. I hate to say, we're partially culpable for their ignorance. Yeah, it's a very a terrible state of affairs. I don't think, I think I'm bullish because we're always bullish on the Jewish people. But again, the reality is that the vast majority of Jews in America are completely unaffiliated. That's the majority. I don't know if it's the vast majority. It's certainly the majority. So what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? And Israel's not as bad because Israel's a Jewish state, and everyone's Jews, and they, for better or for worse, they are persecuted, and they live as Jews, and they grow up in a Jewish society, and they speak Hebrew. It's much better in Israel than it is today. But again, the majority of America, the largest denomination of American Jewry is unaffiliated. The largest. That's a terrible state of affairs. David, what's your take on this, David?
I'm trying to struggle. I'm trying to understand if by cut off is he saying correct, like cut off
Yeah, so I don't know.
permanently,
This is the
or is he
translation.
saying?
Let me open up the English translation. No, it says menatkim. Menatkim doesn't mean, it's not the same word as kares. Doesn't mean cut off
Okay.
in the biblical sense. It means that they're severed. Probably
They're different. I got you. Okay, so then by teshuva they can come back and
Of course,
be accepted. Yes.
Of course. It's great to see Steve here. Steve, you're on mute, but I want to first congratulate you on the Texans win last night, making the playoffs.
Yep. Thank you very much.
You must be thrilled.
We were getting into that before you came on, Rabbi. But I did want to say, it's not, it is a shame that a lot of Jewish people don't know basic Judaism, but it's kind of dovetails, I think, with a lot of students today at Harvard don't know the 3 branches of the federal government. They've interviewed them on the street in Harvard, and and we've seen what's coming out of institutions like Harvard lately too. A lot of ignorance. So it's a shame. It's not real surprising.
Yeah,
it's disturbing.
I will tell you that the logo, the coat of arms of Yale actually does have Hebrew in it. Yeah.
When
did not
I
know
read
that.
that. I read that university
I did
presidents.
not know that,
did.
but I'll bet you a lot of the students there don't either.
Yeah. You know what it says? It says Urim V'Tumim. Urim V'Tumim. What it says on the Yale logo. Look it up. Don't trust me. Look at Yale. I guess it's logo or coat of arms. No, coat of arms. Maybe it's what it is. Coat of arms.
when Harvard and Yale were founded, you couldn't graduate without taking Hebrew.
There you go. Yeah, Urim V'Tumim. Look it up. Coat of arms, Yale University. Here's from the Wikipedia. With an open book and the Hebrew words Urim and Thummim inscribed upon it in Hebrew letters. Below the shield on a scroll appears the Yale's official motto, Lux et Veritas, light and truth.
Rabbi, also, you made a comment, towards the end about the way we prepare for the Messiah with no sacrifices is to study the laws. But
Yes.
and that goes without saying, we should study Torah, but is also prayer as a means of atonement, doesn't that also go with
Of
this?
course. Yes.
Yeah.
And part of the prayer, we say it every day, is a prayer for repentance.
Right.
That's part of it. And by the way, when it comes to sacrifices, part of the sacrifices was prayer.
Mhm.
Yeah, because you have to do an atonement. And remember, we said that the prayer alone, like the reason why he says the general reason behind sacrifice is that prayer alone is not sufficient. You want to do an action with it as well.
Mhm.
That was the
Right.
sacrifice. It was a way to amplify the prayer. But certainly
Right.
the prayer is part of it. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Can you say the line in the Hebrew prayer that we say many times a day that has the idea of sacrifice in it?
Yes. So it's the
Okay,
Aleinu
Father.
prayer at the end of the davening. So this is the prayer. This is 2 paragraphs. The one he's focusing on is on the last one. Al Kain. Therefore, Nikaveh. Nikaveh
Okay.
lecha. We're mikaveh, which means we're yearning, we're anticipating. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem our God. Liros, to see. Mehera, speedily. B'tiferes uzacha, in the splendor of your might. To remove all the idols from the world, and to cut off all the foreign deities. To fix the world. That's the term tikkun olam, by the way. That's where it comes from. The Taken Olam, to fix the world, the Malchus Shakai, with the kingdom of God. Today, a lot of people use the term Tikkun Olam to mean like, climate change, or things like that, which is nonsense. So the term comes from, not that it's nonsense, but it's not Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam means the Taken Olam to fix the world, Malchus Shakai, with the kingdom of God. And it says, all the children of the flesh, all of humanity will call out in your name. All the evil ones of the world will be removed. All those who live on earth will know and will recognize. For you, towards you, all knees will bow. All tongues will swear. They'll all bow before you, Hashem our God. Continues. It's all about what we're hoping for. We're hoping to witness. It's hoping for Messiah. So
Thank
it's
you.
the second paragraph of the Aleinu.
Okay, I'll look for it. Thank you very much.
Yes, which you can also find online as well. I'll find you if you want the actual citation. I send it here in the chat if anyone's interested. So you can find it in English.
I have a C-door, so I'm gonna look for
There you
it.
go. You have a seat. Oh, you're good. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, here we go. I'm gonna send it in English here in the chat. So if you want to look at it. Okay, who else here wants to chime in? Chime.
Rabbi, I have 2 questions.
Yes, go ahead, Paul.
Okay, first, just isn't it true that that in the temple that non-Jews could have a sacrifice brought?
Correct. Yes.
So
The temple is considered a house of prayer for all nations, and yes, non-Jews can bring sacrifices.
So would it be fair then to say that Noahides also should be learning about sacrifices, even if it's to that level, so that.
Absolutely.
And my second question was, I remember one of your podcasts with your brother-in-law, Shmuley Botnick, who I believe makes a living as a lawyer, as he's mentioned in his podcast. But he also mentioned one time that he was thinking about, he looked forward, if there was, the temple was reestablished, that he could go and bring sacrifices. So that led me to think about, how prepared do you see the Jewish world to reinstitute a temple? Do you know, like, yes, there are people very serious about this who are preparing and ready to step up if tomorrow that were to happen?
There are some people that are very, very serious about it. Other people are less. I'm not going to make a general comment about, offer commentary about the general preparedness. But I will say, Shmuley Botnick is a Kohen as well. So for him, it's much more serious, He's a Kohen, so he's got to know that he really has to know this, because the Chofetz Chaim was very clear that the Kohen definitely needs to know this. I will tell you that some of the most prestigious yeshivos in the world, maybe the most prestigious yeshiva in the world, yeshivos in the world, spend a lot of time studying the Talmudic portions that deal with sacrifices. So there was an acceptance of this campaign of the Chofetz Chaim. He made a campaign to get people to start learning Kachim, which is, again, the section of books in the Talmud that are oriented around sacrifices. He made a campaign, and people did hearken to it. So there are a lot more experts today about Kachim than there were, let's say, 150 years ago. There's many books written about it. Many books, like scholarly works written in that. So I would say there has been definitely a gravitation towards learning these laws. I'm definitely not an expert. I do try to, when I read this, I said, I'm going to try a little bit, So I'm learning now one of the books of Mishnah that deal with it's one of the books of Kachim. But I'm very, 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 very far from being an expert. I like learning these laws because it's like in the Sefer Chinuch context, it's like a general, very much a general introduction. It's very much of brief snapshot of these laws. But there are people that are very serious about it, and hopefully they're getting ready. But everyone has to do whatever they can on their level. I sent many of y'all the Messiah cards, right? Bunch of you guys, I think whoever asked me, I sent them. I got some nods here in the group. Oh, there you go. Mike showing us. This lady, I'm telling you, she's on fire. She's ready. Like every day she's waking up, okay, Messiah may be coming today. I speak to her on the phone, and she's amazing. I got to bring her on the podcast because she really is a powerhouse. And she's talking about, like, it's serious. Let's go. And she's right. Because it hasn't happened yet, but it is serious. Let's go. So that's a good idea. Get her on the podcast. Talk about this initiative. So again, she's not learning the laws per se. Yeah, it's another good example. Yeah, David Block in the chat talked about the Temple Institute. These are the guys who are like preparing the actual accoutrements of the temple. And they're very serious about this.
I have a question.
There you
In
go.
my ignorance, I had to be corrected by one of our people at the shul, but in my ignorance, I thought that all kosher slaughterers had to be rabbis. Was there a time when they were rabbis? And then
No, it's a separate domain.
okay, so
You do want someone who has Yirah Shamayim, as it's known, who's fearful of heaven. Because if someone's doing a slaughter, you want to make sure that they're not going to, fudge with it. You know,
Right.
because sometimes it could entail like a loss, you know. If someone knows that, hey, if I kind of pass this off as kosher, even though it wasn't really good, the knife wasn't checked well or whatever, you want someone that's reliable. But it's not a rabbinic, necessarily a rabbinic requirement, or it's not a requirement for someone to be a rabbi.
Well, don't the Cohen, won't they be slaughtering?
Yes,
mean, they
the
do
Kohen
the
would need to,
slaughter.
in Temple of Kohen, we need to be certified. That would need to be a real
Okay,
expert.
but that's for the sacrifices, not for people just to eat
But
food.
even today, you know, you want to make sure that someone who does this work, someone like that, will be righteous at least.
How do you check those people? Because I know people say they are, but like for
The,
a grow and behold or something.
how do you check them? I don't check them. I don't check them. But I will tell you that the people that when you buy kosher food, there's an organization that's going to stand behind and say, I certify that this is kosher. I checked them, I verified them, I vetted them, I checked them. I have someone who's there oversighting, and I'm putting my reputation on the line for
Right.
this.
Yeah, I see that part, but I'm just curious. It just seems like a very lofty job, like a
Oh
big
yeah,
job.
very important responsibility. Actually,
Right.
I had a chat with a rabbinic administrator in Houston, Texas. Oh, just a couple of days ago. It was Shabbos. Maybe it was yesterday. I said to him, I said, you know, I said, you're responsible that when I go to a kosher restaurant, the food's kosher. It's like on you. Like how does that make you feel? He's like, I lose sleep over it. So he told me, like, it's exactly what I want to hear. I want to know if there's someone who's an expert in the laws who's losing sleep over the fact that if there's any non-kosher that ends up being, you know, he signs his name, this is kosher. It's on him to a certain extent. It's on you as well if you eat it. Obviously, you know, it's not intentional. He's like, I lose sleep. I said, that's exactly what I want to hear. I want you to lose sleep over that. Yeah. That's correct, Pat. It's not just chulin, try zvachim, menachos, etc., etc. Eliana, you have your hand raised so patiently.
Thank you, Rabbi. When the time comes that we are required to make these sacrifices, those of us who are here, let's say in Texas,
Yes.
will we be in Israel when the Messiah comes? How do we make our sacrifice?
You would have to go there to bring a sacrifice. A lot of people are expecting to move there when Messiah comes.
Okay.
So there's no obligation to move there when Messiah comes, but it is kind of expected that a lot of people will move there.
Okay. So those of us who believe that he could come now any day, that all the signs are there, is this another preparation that we
Yes.
should? Okay. So have your passport and your papers ready to go. Thank you.
I'm not sure you're right there, by the way. Sharon. I'm not sure that you won't need a passport.
Why?
Why? Yeah. Why would you not need a passport?
I mean, like things be so chaotic. Like, who's gonna really look for passports when Mashiach comes?
Why? But why
It's
should it
gonna be
change?
huge. I
But why?
don't know, because
Yeah, I'm not with you in this. I think that you
well,
need passports.
I guess if you want to be on the safe side, but I think everything is gonna be so. I mean, this is my own brain that when Mashiach comes, people are gonna be stunned. Like it is going to
But
be like,
why would you not need your passport?
because there's not gonna be no one we're gonna be answering to but Mashiach, but
Who
Hashem,
says that?
right?
Who says that?
I would hope.
You I hope
Okay, okay.
you could grow wings.
Well, all right.
Who needs
So
an
even
airplane?
if you have a
Swim.
passport, they could deny you. They could say, no, you're not leaving. We're gonna
No,
kill.
but who is to say that the rules of the world will stop? The Rambam was very clear that the world's going to continue the way it goes. The only change is going to be these changes. So I don't have a reason to believe that there's going to be such a shift that nation states will cease to exist. Where does it say that?
But when
Doesn't say it
Hashem
anywhere.
said, that the nations will bring their offerings to his holy mountain, now they will come there. So you
But why
have to
won't
be
they
able
need a
to do it
passport?
freely, because if you
Yeah.
don't, he'll withhold the rain. So it's like you have a choice. You can come or you don't.
But you don't think you'll have to buy a ticket on the plane? Why not? I don't see things changing that are not necessary. You know, I think that there's going to be that no one will be able to be denied to enter if they want to come bring a sacrifice. But why would you not need a passport?
Oh no.
Will the planes have less turbulence? I don't think so.
I just felt like, the things that hold us back in this world or
Hey, a
keep us,
passport's not so hard to get a passport.
what?
It's not so hard to get a passport.
No, it's not. But it's still, I don't know. I'm on the fence. I mean, I'll listen to you. I respect your answer, of
Oh,
course. You know more than I do.
Thank you.
But I just, I hope.
Nathaniel's furiously looking through the book to find something. Furiously. Sandy, what do you think, Sandy?
Great class, Rabbi, as always. And the idea of, since we don't have a temple, and studying is, it's accepted as though we're bringing the offering. So once a year, when we go through the portions, we read the sacrifices and how they're done and all of that. But say today, I realize I have done something that if the temple were standing, I would need to bring an offering.
Yes.
At that point, do I need to stop, go look in Leviticus and find what that would be and study?
No,
it
what the
point?
sages used to do, the sages would make a note like on their journal and say, when Messiah, like I'm keeping track of like what sacrifices you need to bring when Messiah comes, but they wouldn't necessarily learn it per se. They would learn it every day, really. Every day they would study it. In fact, if you look at the Siddur in the prayer book, it has in it the beginning of the prayer. It has all this. Go through all the sacrifices. Most people skip it. It goes through all the sacrifices, and that's because of this point where you're supposed to study it, and that counts as if you brought a sacrifice. In fact, there's even a prayer that you say that may it be that my reciting of these citations about the sacrifices, it should count for me as if I brought an actual sacrifice. Most people actually skip it, but that's the idea, and that's why sometimes it's so insistent, like not just to read it, but to also actually study it. But I wouldn't say that that it's used in this targeted fashion. I would say that if someone wants to do it, they can keep track of it. They could tally, they could tabulate, how many sacrifices they need to bring. But most people I know don't actually do that.
Is
There
it
aren't
kind of-
enough. There aren't enough bovines on the planet to cover all the people who are accidentally transgressing Shabbos.
Would that fit in with the idea back, say somebody living in Israel back when the temple was standing, they lived a long distance from Jerusalem. Wasn't it once a year they would save up, and then once a year they would come and
Right. So
take care of that?
a lot of people would bring their sacrifices in bunches, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Got a couple of questions, unless Nathaniel's got something he wants to add to this.
He's very, very intent on finding something.
No, I did find it. It was Micah chapter 4. For all the peoples will go forth, each man in the name of his God, but we will go forth with the name of Hashem our God forever and ever. But that's right after basically, it's basically very explicit that basically, the Mashiach is here. Obviously, Micah chapter 4. All the peoples will stream to it. But then there's that verse that's an oddball. It just seems like it doesn't, like the Mashiach is here, but then all the peoples will go forth, each
It's
man in the
chapter
name
4.
of
What's the
God.
verse? What's the verse number?
Micah chapter 4, verse 5. But it's like we will go with God, Israel will go with God, but the nations
You're
don't
saying
seem to be
it seems to
completely on
imply that
board.
even the nations will cling to their foreign gods. That's what you're saying. That's how you interpret the verse. Is that right?
Art Scroll has it. I mean, will
I just pulled it up. I just pulled it up on my computer here. I just clicked Rashi and I found the answer.
Okay.
Easy. He answers all of our problems. What he says is he just adds one word. They will go to destruction with their gods, meaning anyone who still clings to their gods is done. They're going to go to destruction. So go has multiple meanings. He's saying when go means like go, you're out of here. Go, get out of here.
Okay.
The Radak gives a different answer. The Radak says they'll go up to that point. Up to that point, there will still be believers in foreign gods. But Messiah will bring it back. So 2 answers to your question, Nathaniel. And I didn't answer them. I just opened up the Rashi and the Radak. Each one gives a different answer to your question. The point is that when Messiah comes, that will no longer be a tenable position. So either they're going to change or they'll be gone.
I did have a question. When exactly kind of dovetails with the parsha and this lesson, but when and how was Levi chosen for the priesthood? I mean, because if you look at Yaakov's blessings to like Yehuda, I mean that's pretty definitive that they're kind of, for kingship. I mean, there's some leading, but as far as Levi, it's with Simeon, the blessing. But I mean, as far as like, they talk about like Moshe and Aaron and the Levites weren't the slavery wasn't applied to them per se. So when was he chosen for that role? I mean, because if
so there's the question of being chosen and being anointed.
They were obviously when Moshe with the golden calf at that point they were
no, they were still not chosen
for that.
They were still not chosen at that point. They were selected, they were designated, but they weren't actually Kohanim and Levites at that point. It was only later on when they get consecrated. So that's in I think it's Parashat Shmini, at the beginning of Leviticus. They were designated by Jacob, but they weren't necessarily. It wasn't implemented until later. And the truth is that applies also with the monarchy. Even though Jacob tells Judah that you'll be the father of the monarchy, the first king was not from the tribe of Judah. The first king was Saul, right? Saul was not from Judah. Saul was from Benjamin. But once David was selected and anointed by Samuel, thenceforth all legitimate kings come from the tribe of Judah and the family of David. And if you look, by the way, in Rashi commentary on that verse in chapter 49, he stresses this point. That when the verse says, Lo Yasser Shevim Yehuda, that the ruler, the kingdom, the monarchy, the dominion will not depart from Judah, Rashi explains that once they're selected, once that is implemented, then thenceforth it's not going to be challenged, or it's not going to be legitimately challenged.
Yeah, because Aaron seems to have some leeway to like go meet Moshe, in Midian, and like, if they were in slavery, he can just like go and leave and.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. The Levites did not do work for Pharaoh, and obviously he was able to leave, as evidenced in last week's parsha.
I mean, Egypt somehow recognized the Levites.
Yes.
At the time.
Correct. But they weren't, again, Levites by our definition of doing work in the temple, Sandy, you still had some more questions.
Yeah, about the portion. If we could go to the Parsha.
Sure.
In Exodus 6:14, it says the heads of the houses of the fathers are, and it lists Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. The other tribes are not mentioned.
Yes,
The focus from that point on seems to zero in on Levi
yes.
and his genealogy. So if the ultimate focus was on Levi, why are Reuben and Simeon even mentioned?
Yeah, I spoke about this in the podcast. It's a great question. So from what I recall, there's a few answers. I remember seeing maybe that because Reuven, Shimon, and Levi were kind of cursed in the blessing of Jacob, therefore, as a way to balance it out, they're mentioned over here, just as because really we need to talk about Moshe and Aaron and their genealogy. But as a way, but Reuven and Shimon are also appendage to that in order to kind of compensate for their curse that they got, or curse sort of that they got from Jacob. Alternatively, is that really it wants to start with Reuven, it wants to start with Levi, but you don't just skip the older brothers. I don't remember the exact answers that I had, but I did speak about it in the Va'era podcast.
Okay.
But
Is
I
that
haven't
a previous
heard it in a
podcast
while.
or when you're going to release?
The one that was already released, the rebroadcast.
Okay, I'll go look for
If
that.
I'm not mistaken. Again, I haven't listened to it in a while, but that's what I remember.
Okay, I'll look for that.
Here we go. I just pulled it up here. I quoted from Rav Hirsch. That's to banish the notion that they were divine in any way. Don't think that Moshe and Aaron are different. They're like their cousins. Reuven and his family and Shimon and their family. There's an idea from the Seforno. Lots of prophets came from Levi. Anyhow, I spoke about it in the podcast, so that's what that's where I would send you. I want to juice the download numbers, the podcast. I want to juice the numbers.
I'll go look for that. I'm sure Paul knows exactly where it is and what date it was and all of that. So, my other question in chapter 6, verse 20, it says, talks about Aaron, Amram, and Yocheved, and she gave birth to Aaron and Moshe.
Yeah.
Miriam is not mentioned, even though Miriam later played such an important, and had already played an important part in what was happening. And it just seems odd that such an important person was not mentioned as being one of their children.
Yes. So it is mentioned later on. The fact that Miriam is part of this family is mentioned later on. So the question is, why it's not mentioned here?
Right.
I don't know what the answer is, but the purpose of these verses is to give us the pedigree of Moshe and Aaron. They're the ones who went to Paro, right? If you look at, let's see, you look at verses 26 and 27. It's telling us that this whole genealogy is all about identifying the two people who are going to Pharaoh. And that's probably the answer. Is that it's not really about the genealogy per se. It's about the genealogy of these two people, and therefore it's not talking about the whole family. That's not the purpose of these verses, and therefore it omits Miriam because she's not relevant to this. Even though she's going to be attributed, we know that she's the sister, of course, of Moshe, that we know, but she's going to be attributed to Aaron as well later on. After the splitting of the sea, and she leads the women in song. It tells us, I think this is chapter 14 or 15. What is it? 15? Where it says that she is the sister of Aaron. So we could do the math and figure out that she is the sister of Moshe as well.
So the purpose of this, if I'm understanding, is it to give credibility to Moses and Aaron that they are the ones that have been selected to bring the people out. It's to give them credibility.
It's giving us their pedigree. Who are these two people who are going to be interfacing with Pharaoh and leading the Jewish people out? Moshe and Aaron. Okay, who are they?
And the last
that verse that attributes Miriam to Aaron is found in chapter 15, verse 20. That's where you'll find it. You want to look at it.
Okay. And then the last one, it even narrows more down to Aaron's descendants. It lists his 4 sons. Why are Moshe's 2 sons? They're not, they just seem like they just don't exist. Why are his sons not mentioned
But
there?
his sons are mentioned already in Parshas Shmos, so that's probably the answer. And his sons are going to be mentioned later on. I think the answer is because they're not even there. They're not present. They're still in Midian. So maybe that's the reason why. And also we already know who Moshe married. He married Zipporah. We know that he had 2 sons. That's featured in Parshas Shmos. It's going to be retold again in Parshas Yisro. So that's probably the answer. Either they're not there, or because that's information we already know. We already know that Moshe's wife and who he married and his children. So I would imagine that one of those 2 is the answer.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Oh, thank you. Okay, everyone. This was delightful, as it always is. I'm already looking forward to next week. What can I say? It was a real joy, a real pleasure, and I appreciate all of y'all. Highlight of the week so far is to spend time with y'all, and I hope everyone has a great week. And
Good luck and best wishes with the baby. We're
thank you.
all on the
Thank you.
edge of our seats.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you, Rabbi. Very informative as
Thank
always.
you. Very enjoyable as for me, and I'm looking forward to next week. Same time, please, God. Same time and same location. Unless things change, and then I'll convey the information to y'all.
Awesome.
everyone.
Good luck.
Thank you. Best regards. Okay. Bye.